welcome to the Relationship Restaurant. We are Poppy and Geoff Spencer. Delighted you're with us. This is episode 84, and with the Relationship Restaurant, we are all about heart-healthy communications, and today is no exception. So we have an interesting new series that we're going to be getting into starting today. Poppy's going to introduce that.
So we've been thinking a lot this last year of 2020 with all of the events that are going on, and the external exterior events that influence our lives and our routines and everything have been turned upside down, of course. And so we titled the next 6 weeks for the Great Awakening, to see if we can't maybe start to go within to get some of the answers that we all have. And one of the things that we started talking about was starting with our belief systems. And so we've often said that, belief systems can be a tricky thing. And we've all certainly been able to have experiences of cognitive dissonance. And that is where we believe something to be a reality, a truth. And when something bumps up against it,
we don't like it. We don't like it when something challenges what we are really sure is the reality, that it's nailed into our core, that this is the truth, and we don't like something saying, nah, not so fast.
And so we don't want to get out of our comfort zone, especially when as we've said earlier, that our external worlds have been turned upside down, and we don't want to leave that comfortable place that we're in. But we're actually asking that you do that you do leave that comfortable place that you're in. And, my expert over here on Star Wars is going to give a little bit of a metaphorical messaging so that we can maybe understand some of the things that were going on. So the full disclosure, I did not like Star Wars until we were together about 10 years ago. I was like, yeah,
that's because she had a bad date with a guy that spoiled the whole thing for her.
So I didn't really get it. I didn't get the whole Star Wars thing. But after living with Geoff now for all these years, it really makes sense. So,
it's some very.
So what's your favorite part about Star Wars?
I think there is an ongoing theme throughout all of the Star Wars episodes. And it always comes down to a very simple message. It is good versus evil. That is always what this is about: good versus evil. And the dark side of the Force is always tempting and always a potential threat, and always viewed as something very powerful, yet very dark and very scary.
And also as dark and powerful, but it's like, so that the other people on the good side cannot do anything to combat that. They feel helpless, right? They feel powerless
against the dark side.
Yes.
I wouldn't say they're powerless against it. They feel it's always the temptation of the dark side is always the greatest fear that. As we were talking just a moment ago about, the Yoda had a little expression, a little thing we were talking about that, fear leads to anger, and all these things always lead to the dark side. Anger is always what pushes that forward all the time.
Okay, so fear, we all have that fear, right? We all have that fear-based in us, and oftentimes we push it away and we just default back to
what we're comfortable with. Sure.
And a lot of times it goes back to that cognitive dissonance, right? Where we are feeling, do I want to be right or do I want to feel good? And this is a common mantra that we when we work with women who have been in difficult relationships, challenging relationships with people who have manipulated them or gaslit them or controlled them. We help them to reclaim their inner strength and their identities,
their true self.
And so we often will say, do you want to be right or do you want to feel good? And so when we are in these uncertain times, oftentimes we default to wanting to be right. And that I'm not sure that that's always the best answer for us.
And often we don't feel good at all. What we've seen, there's been so much anger and so much uncertainty that we often would just find that it is a place that being right just feels, it doesn't feel, it feels safe, but it doesn't feel good.
It doesn't feel good.
You have a lot of conflict within you, but I know I'm right. I know I'm right. And so it's often done with almost an angry edge. And often you have to look within yourself and say, is that really, am I really right? Am I really, is what I'm looking at actually true or just perceived to be? Because one of the things I've always said, and probably heard me say it 1,000 times, that our perception is our reality. We see what we perceive to be true is what that's truth. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is. It's just what we perceive it to be.
So when we have that cognitive dissonance within us, it usually doesn't feel good. And so we're asking people in this Great Awakening time to ask yourself 2 words. What if, and then ... you fill in the rest. What if what I've believed all along has not been true? And as we mentioned, in the clients that we work with who have been in relationships that were not healthy, they didn't have heart-healthy communication. Some of them abusive, verbally abusive, emotionally abusive, spiritually abusive, where the gaslighting has occurred. Those are really tough situations to get out of, especially if you've been in that relationship for 10, 20 years. It's really hard.
That's all you know. That's the dynamic of a relationship. That's all you really know and understand.
So we're asking people to step into transitional space. And transitional space is that limbo land where your life feels in limbo. You don't know what step to take next. And I know we have a good Star Wars message for that, when we don't know what to do next.
It is always
Obi-Wan says it, right?
Well, it's always searching your feelings. They'll say that, reach out with the force and search your feelings within, because we often don't search our feelings. We often push feelings aside and just go with, again, this perceived reality that we think it has to be right, because it's been taught to us. In fact, I know one of the things Mr. Ruiz, the 4 agreements.
Oh yeah, Don Miguel.
Yeah. One of the things that he often speaks about is that we've been taught all kinds of things in our lives, and it isn't necessarily aren't always truths. They're just been something that's been taught,
and we've been basically conditioned
we
and
get programmed. We were programmed, exactly the same word, programmed. We've been programmed to understand and believe certain things. And part of this great awakening that we're all experiencing, and it's an ongoing thing, that we're starting to learn that a lot of things that all of us thought were truths, things that we thought were
historical
facts, standards of society that were very safe things to be understanding. We're starting to realize that a lot of these things aren't necessarily the case, that there's a lot of things that we've been misled.
So I guess what we're asking people is, again, and we'll say this at the end, is to have the courage to ask yourself, what if?
Mm-hmm.
What if I shifted my perception? What if I allowed to expand my thinking a little bit to say, wait a minute, what if there's more to this story than I thought? And as I said, when we were working with these women, so often they have comments and they define themselves by this, and they feel such shame.
How did I miss this? How did I
can't believe I was so stupid.
How did all this go on for all these years and I didn't see or understand this?
Other people saw it, but I didn't, and I feel so ashamed, or I feel guilty, or I'm angry at myself. And so they go through these stages of feeling even worse about themselves, right? And so that's what we do is in our private group, our very discreet group, we work with women to make sure that they can rebuild that self-trust and self-confidence, because we all have that. And so here's what Obi-Wan Kenobi says to Luke.
Luke, you're going to find that many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on your own point of view. The truth is often what we make of it. You heard what you wanted to hear, believed what you wanted to believe. And this is something we're seeing happen in a huge way in our world right now, that we're all experiencing this. There's certain things we want to believe, and we want to hold these truths, but the truth can often be much different from what we are perceiving.
Right. And so we're just asking you to trust yourself. When I certainly know that being a mom and giving birth, they have something called transitional labor. And that's like when it gets really tough. Those are the labor pains that are like serious. These aren't Braxton Hicks. Those are the things that have happened over the last maybe 10 years, 20 years of our lives, maybe even 50 years of our lives. We've had Braxton Hicks things, but now I think we're feeling it. You can feel the energy in the world around you, where we have these intense labor pains, and that's called transitional labor.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly experienced that with my children giving birth. And it's like, you cannot really focus on anything else but that. You're in it, but the beauty of it is that when you're going through transitional labor, there have been many mothers that are in the midst of giving birth, and they'll say,
I'll never do this again.
Yeah. And then of course you have the child, and you're like, that all evaporates. So I'm asking you to trust that, or we're asking you to trust that this transitional space that you're in, that really uncomfortable, uncertain, it's overwhelming. It's really a chaos feeling. It's messy. It doesn't feel good.
There's another great quote Yoda has here.
But wait, but after, it doesn't feel good, but after you pass through this, it's golden. It's wonderful. So we're asking you to take that leap.
Yoda says, train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose. And that's one of these great things that a lot of us cling to, these old beliefs and these standards of our lives, because it's scary to let those things go. Is like, well, then if these things aren't true, then what is? And you might discover that there's some wonderful truth that you've just haven't had a chance to see. And great things might be coming that are far, far better than the truth that you understood today. That's what we often say with these people women are in these very challenging relationships, same kind of dynamic. They're almost afraid to lose it because at least it's something. And the idea of going out on their own and being, not having anybody in their life and having to start over again can be a scary thing, but it often could be, and it usually is dramatically better. We almost always hear just wonderful stories when people move away from very hard and damaging and challenging relationships and find wonderful things in their lives.
Right. And Obi-Wan Kenobi also says, be mindful of your thoughts, Anakin, they betray you. So sometimes our thoughts can lead us down the wrong path, right? And so if we were to challenge that, what if this isn't what I want? So anyway, we have a bunch of quotes and things from Star Wars that we're going to share with you. One of the things that one of our members said in our group was from Mark Twain. And he said, some of the worst things in my life never even happened. So our imaginations can be wrought with all sorts of horrific things, good things too, but a lot of times the negative things kind of outweigh that. Don't you agree?
And in fact, that's why so many people often hesitate to make changes, because they fear all these different things that aren't happening, but they perceive them like, oh my gosh, this could happen, this could happen, this could happen. And they often lose track of the fact that many wonderful things could be happening in the same breath.
So in Star Wars, doesn't Luke is in trouble? He's calling out for Obi-Wan Kenobi to help him, but he's like, what should I do in this situation? But Obi-Wan doesn't give him like the whole.
He doesn't give him the whole answer. In fact, there's a funny. I recently had to rewatch a lot of these things to get it refreshed in my memory. But there's a scene, and I think it's the second, or in the case of the listing, the episode 5, but we knew it as the second one that came out, where Luke is out and he's been been attacked by a snow monster out on this terrible Hoth planet, ice planet, and this monster takes him in, and he eventually escapes from the monster. But as he's trying to run away, he's exhausted. He falls in the snow, and he's in big trouble. And he's looking up, just gasping for life.
Help.
And he goes, "Obi-Wan, help!" And Obi-Wan's image shows up and says, "Luke, you must travel to the Dagobah system to meet with Yoda, the Jedi Master," which wasn't the answer that
right.
Luke was looking for. Luke was like, "I'm here to save you, Luke, and here's a warm blanket and supplies to take care of you." And that's all he hears from is the next step that he needs to take in his journey to become a Jedi Knight, his next step in training. And of course, as the image of Obi-Wan fades away, you see Han Solo come riding up on his little horse-like creature that they had, and he is there to save Luke. So Obi-Wan knew that was taking place. But
he just didn't tell
Luke was going to be. But he didn't tell him that. He said, he didn't say you're fine. He just said the next thing you need to do is the following. So,
and I love that. Like, what's the next step you can take?
Right.
When you are afraid, when you're feeling that
you don't
fear.
have to have all the answers at one time. And that's one of the things that Poppy and I have done lots of research here of late, and looking at all kinds of other quote possibilities of what's going on in our world beyond what we have many times perceived to be realities. And so that's what we do. We just keep taking the next step and the next step, and we just look and take it a little deeper, and we discover that there's a lot of things different in the world than we actually at first thought.
And what happens when you allow yourselves to do that, to take a little courage, it does take some courage to do that. When you allow yourselves to do that, you can't unsee what you finally see.
And what often drives
that is an amazing thing. It's also sometimes you see things that you didn't intend on seeing and you don't want to see, but it also will fuel you with a passion to do something to serve, because I believe we're all here to serve.
Mm-hmm.
We're all here on this earth to serve.
Yeah, we in fact, Poppy and I just keep discovering more and more ways that we feel that we are going to be able to serve. We love helping these couples that we've helped. We love helping these ladies that have been in challenging relationships and be able to move on to better and stronger things. And it's often that they have a hard time, in many cases, just believing that they can take a next step. In fact, they reach out to us. That's often when they first talk to us, is they feel like something isn't right. And that's what we're asking a lot of you to do, is when you look at the things that are going on in the world and things,
say, what if?
Yeah, and things don't seem quite right. This doesn't seem logical. This doesn't seem to make sense. When those kind of questions are being raised in your mind, don't fall back on everything you've known. Yeah, that's just the way things are now. It's like, it doesn't seem right. If this doesn't seem right, then look beyond that and open your mind to saying there must be something else here that I'm missing. This can't be the realities of what I'm experiencing.
And so one of the things that one of the people that we followed who I thought was brilliant was Ian David Rogers, who says, some people believe that some things will never change, right? You'll say, oh, well, what's the use, right? He says, this is why they never change. They have that thought which instructs their mind to never change its view. He said, that is a belief that works. Unfortunately, this belief is based on a negative emotion, an inner sadness that's reinforced when they have that thought. So if it's like you keep saying nothing will ever change, nothing will get better, that'll
manifest itself.
Exactly. He said, beliefs have more to do with understanding our emotions rather than understanding our thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So if we understand the core of a thought that we have, let's say we have an undesirable thought that we don't want. If we understand the core of the emotion that prompted that thought, we can get to the core of what we need to do to change it, if that makes sense. And so because
the emotion is usually fear that stops you from pursuing it.
And so when we have if we're aware of the words that we use to describe and what we say to ourselves, the self-talk that we say, if we can become aware of those words and shift them, reframe them, and say that, because we've said this so many times on these podcasts, but our brains are wired to have a 4-to-1 ratio of negative to positive thoughts. That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And we have more than 75,000 thoughts a day, the human brain, right? And if 3/4 of those are negative, like,
it's a tough ratio.
It's tough. And so we need to be able to stop and pause and go, what if I shifted this thought to make it positive? What if I made the best of this thought? What's the best thing that can happen from this thought? We certainly did that during 2020 when there was lockdowns and mandates and social distancing and no seeing friends and no seeing family and all that. It was like, well, this is a time to go within. This is a time to really kind of examine our introspective selves and ask ourselves, what do we want to do? What is our purpose here? How can we best serve our families and our friends and humanity? What's the best thing that we can do? And we really got some revealing answers, which we'll share in the upcoming podcast episodes. So just be aware of the words that you use to describe yourself. And he also says, we often think that what we believe is true because we don't think about the words or questions that enable us to know how to feel in order to get out of the place that we don't want to be in. There's so often that was like, well, I don't like this icky space. So I'm just going to let that negative emotion or that negative thought ride. I'm just going to let it carry over. And then it becomes a bad habit, of course. Let's see, I wanted to share one of the things that I said to all 4 of my children when they were growing up, and we still say it today, they still kind of roll their eyes a little bit. But when they're confused about something or uncertain or nervous, when they were taking a test or the final exam or something, I would say, you have everything you need to know. And they go, okay, write it, whatever. But you do have everything you need to know. You have the resources within you. And it's just a matter of accessing them and not letting the brain, the ego, override that.
Or just information that the world is pushing at you, that the world wants you to believe, and that you can say, I'm not sure that's an accurate thing.
So what happens when, like, what your friends, families, and if they disagree? Because certainly when we have fear and uncertainty, it can divide us as a human race. And I think it certainly did show us that, indicate that to us during the pandemic, that was so-called pandemic that occurred. And what it did was it just exacerbated everyone's fear center in the brain. The amygdalas around the world were heightened to such a degree.
High alert.
And so everybody was uncertain. And then that manifests itself into your friends, your communities, your families, where their coping mechanisms were really challenged. And if they didn't have well-developed coping mechanisms, we certainly saw a lot of depression, anxiety, suicide, mental health.
And a lot of younger people don't have these coping mechanisms well-developed. So that's hence the reason why.
Right. And so there's just a lot on the plate. We certainly felt for many of the parents who were home with their kids, trying to work from home with their kids while schooling their children, caring for their children, and keeping a positive outlook. That's a lot of energy to expend, right? And so we always, one of the things that we've asked some of our clients to do is to try and remember their dreams. And so, because in our dreams, your unconscious is like giving you messages, just like Obi-Wan,
it's
right?
working to solve things for you.
And so one of the common dreams that many people have shared is that they have a dream where they're being chased by a male presence with a weapon of some sort, a knife, a gun, a rope, something. It's not like Clue, right?
Like what?
Colonel Mustard.
Oh, Colonel Mustard, right.
In the library with the rope. But they were chasing the dream, and teaching psychology for 10 years, the dream unit was always a really interesting, intriguing time for all of the college students that we had. And so what we asked them to consider is that just to play with the dream, not to interpret it, but just to play with it a little bit. And what they discovered was that oftentimes being chased by a male presence is the sort of the masculine part of our brains, the left side of our brains that's logical, rational, linear, black and white. And that was trying to override the creative, the right brain side. It's creative and intuitive, and trying to override that. And sort of that's what happens when our ego tells us something that it says, no, don't feel that thought. Don't feel that feeling, rather, because I'm in charge, And so trying to overpower. So think about your dreams when you have a dream like that, where something is trying to overpower you. Instead of being frightened by it, take it as a wonderful message to maybe examine it a little bit further.
You and I were talking about this earlier too, is that our egos can regularly do us a huge disservice. We know Poppy and I even talked about this when we were back in college and madly in love, and a misunderstanding took place that caused a breakup, and it was completely a misunderstanding. There was nothing wrong, and both of our egos got in the way of searching for a resolution, searching for a better answer. And my ego, just being a guy, not being wounded, I didn't want to come groveling back to begging for something different. And Poppy had similar things you were saying, that you had your ego saying, no, you're not supposed to do this. You shouldn't pursue the guy any further. There's certain things you can and can't do.
And it was a definite shaping moment for both of our lives, because in that really tough breakup, we lost aspects of our true selves. It's like a little piece of the North Star that we had was chipped off the corner of one of it. And it shaped who we became, who our future partners were going to be, because our authentic, confident, sure, strong selves had just been shaken, had been shipped away a little bit. And so we didn't bring our whole selves. We weren't whole at that point. And that is something that I think has certainly happened to many of us in this past year, that we have little pieces of ourselves that have been chipped away and eroded because we, one of the things that, and here we're on a media platform, but one of the things that we've done to kind of have peace in our hearts is to turn off all news sources that we've been conditioned to watch for many, many years, because it's only one source. And there are many times that we've turned on in the past where we've turned on the TV or watched something streamed live on the computer, and the messaging is exactly the same. And so it's like, wow, I feel like we're getting the same information said in the same words on the same event, and it just seemed like it seemed almost scripted. And so that's when we first started to say, what if someone is trying to condition us, and we ask you to,
what if it doesn't feel quite right, and I'm going to look for others, or other sources, other places where we might find more accurate information.
But the best source is absolutely within. And
search your feelings. That's taking back to the Star Wars. That's always a thing.
And so when we go back to our belief system, it's like, when you don't believe something can happen, it probably won't. And what is Yoda?
There's a scene again back when
Yoda says
Luke has indeed traveled to the Dagobah system, and he's getting trained by Yoda. And when he parked his little spaceship, he parked in a kind of a swamp, and it was half submerged. Well, while they were doing the training, the spaceship, his little fighter thing, kind of sinks into the quagmire further, and he's like, oh no. I'll never get this thing out. And Yoda challenges him to say, use the force to see if you can lift this thing out. And he says, it's so big. He goes, just try. He says, use the force and do it. And so Luke tries to do this, and it moves a little bit, and then it settles back in, and he shrugs his shoulders and walks away defeated, saying it's too big. I just can't do it. And it was, he said, then after a moment or two, Yoda stops and says, doesn't say anything. And he actually uses the force to lift the spaceship out of the quagmire, out of the swamp, and carries it through the air and parks it on dry land. And what Luke says is that I don't believe it. I don't believe you actually did that. And that's in Yoda's response to it, and that's why you fail, because he didn't believe he could do it, and Yoda believed he could, and therefore did. So many times we always push to the believe you can find better answers, believe you can understand something more than what you've been taught and perceived over all these years. There are different answers. And
just going back to the beginning here, when we spoke about many of the clients with whom we work, who are still being, even after they've left unhealthy relationships, they still have to have contact with former partners,
often because of children
and whatever. Or there's court cases that go back, and when they get a text or an email, often it triggers an emotional response in them that is usually fear-based.
They get a pang in their stomach,
and they're anxious, and they may reach out and say, I don't know what to do. This ruined my day. And so we ask that you go within. I think that's the biggest message that we can give you, especially during this time. If you do have more time at home, whether it's going within to meditate as you do so, or journaling, certainly art therapy. I'm a registered art therapist. You can certainly use the power of creation to help evoke some of those unwanted thoughts and feelings that you have. And I think having the support of people who are like-minded, and we like to say like-hearted, as you, will also be really helpful. So our gift to you, I guess, is to say, in this great awakening that you have, that it's a gift that you give to yourself to go inside and find out, like, where are my strengths? What am I made of? What is my purpose? And to find that out. And I know that when I taught psychology, oftentimes my final exam was, who am I? Which really bothered the students and pissed them off quite a bit, because it is too broad and I don't want to do it. A lot of times people don't. They don't want to look
within themselves.
But I think it's really, it's a wonderful gift to yourself too. So thank you so much for sharing with us, or listening as we shared with you, rather. And any parting words from Yoda?
Another quote: in a dark place we find ourselves, and a little more knowledge lights our way.
Yeah. So light your way. Use the force.
Right? Search that knowledge. Yes.
Search the knowledge.
Search for more. So,
all right.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for so much. Bye, you all. Have a good one.